Welcome to another episode of Humility. My name is Paulina Tenner. I'm a founder of GrantTree, and today I'm talking to Anna Downey, the CEO of Buzzbar, about being a vulnerable leader. Anna, you've got a buzzing, it's in the name, Buzzbar, marketing and branding agency. I would definitely consider you a successful entrepreneur, but you told me recently that while being interviewed for the Financial Times, you said you didn't really even identify with the label entrepreneur. Why is that?
Yes, well, it was an interesting, I hadn't really thought about it before. So I think that was the first thing I identified. It was sifted back by the Financial Times, actually, their amazing new publication.
Yeah.
Supporting technology in London and Europe, bringing that together. I felt I identified as an entrepreneur, and I was asked, well, what do you identify as? And I thought, well, a founder, someone who had an idea. What really makes us, who potentially would be coined entrepreneur, any different than any other business owner, I guess. There's so many of us out there. There have been since the beginning of time. So what really makes me identify as an entrepreneur, I don't know, but I haven't really to this day. And I see that others do, but yeah, I'm not too sure really. It's kind of something.
Do you think it's like a worthiness thing that like, oh, you have to have a really disruptive business model, and you have to be doing something that's never been done before in this particular way, and then you can perhaps call yourself an entrepreneur? Do you think it's a question of giving yourself permission inside?
Potentially. I think also, who are the role models that we see, I guess, or who are the entrepreneurs of our generation or that we saw growing up? I don't know if there was entrepreneurship as a degree growing up. I think there was definitely not digital. I'm not.
Maybe one now. I'm not sure if it actually teaches you how to be one, but
there is apparently. Yeah, I actually Googled entrepreneurship.
Degree.
Yeah, no, just entrepreneurship in general. Like, I was like, why don't I, what's going on? Quite often we think a word means something, but it can mean something else. Yeah. So let me just double down on this and see what is the Oxford Dictionary meaning of this. And in my search came up American Express, little blog. What do you do once you've got an entrepreneurship degree? And what are the different jobs you can go into? And so I was like, okay, interesting.
What jobs do you take after having finished the entrepreneurial degree? Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it said things like teacher or, business person. But there were a lot of different options there that I hadn't really thought of. And I thought, that's really interesting. Really, entrepreneurship can be anyone, really, at the end of the day. So who do we see as an entrepreneur? And I think in answering that question, I guess when I hear entrepreneur, I think Richard Branson. I guess that was the first entrepreneur I thought of. What about you? I mean, who do you think is an entrepreneur? Like who's the first person who springs to your mind? Like Adriana Huffington, or I don't know.
Someone like Louise Hay. So these days I really aspire to people that not only have the hustle and like really can hustle things up and make things happen and have an agenda and have a plan, but people where that plan and that agenda comes from somewhere deep within, and it's like aligned with having discovered, okay, I've got these talents, this is my personality, this is what I can bring, and this is how this can be of service to something greater. So Adriana Huffington would be a good example probably as well. But Louise Hay, I'm a big fan. I recently went to a workshop, and she only started Hay House when she was 60. Oh, wow. And I'm just like, this is so amazing. And I think she was involved until she was like 90 or something. So who do you aspire to? Who do you find is, apart from Richard Branson, when you say entrepreneur, you're like, okay, this is what it means?
I didn't really think one day I would have my own business.
Same here, hilariously. I honestly thought like, this is just sounds weird, sounds not really kind of outside the spectrum of possibility. I really thought that.
I mean, do you think kids grow up, you want to be a fireman or a nurse, or...
I wanted to be either an advocate or an acrobat. That's what I told my parents. Like, it's going to be one or the other because they kind of roll off the tongue and they both seem cool enough. So.
An acrobat.
Or an advocate, which is
and
a
an
lawyer.
Advocate, yeah.
Yeah, like devil's advocate.
I wanted to be a lawyer or an astronaut.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think does anyone grow up and say, I want to be a business woman, man, or person? I don't. Maybe people do. I kind of had a business of sorts around me all the time, and for me, this has not ever necessarily been about business. I mean, I think as you grow and form into the person you are in work and your role, you become a business person, especially, I guess, depending on your role, and that's generally, I think, an active choice, or potentially I would say needs to be. It definitely was for me. But I think that ultimately the reason I'm doing and we're doing what we are today is because it was always about connection. It was always about just doing something you loved. And I mean, every minute of every day, it's it's precious. It could be your last. I mean, it could be really your first experiencing something new. So without getting too heavy, I think it's just about loving what you do and whatever that is.
But for me, also recognizing that you can't, like, every single minute of every day, you can't be doing something that you absolutely love. That there's also like a certain sacrifice that you make. You do something that you love, but you have to go through a lot of hoops, and also to do with like facing your darkness, facing your weakness, doing stuff that you don't particularly enjoy, but maybe you don't have the resources in your business to employ someone yet.
Oh yeah, I think we all have that.
Yeah.
It's I think that's the child dream, doing what you love. So then you start to get into this the world of business or entrepreneurship, or doing what you love, and realizing there's so many other things you have to do that maybe you're doing now because it's what you feel is your purpose, or because it comes with doing something that you love. But I think, like all things, as you become an adult, you realize there's a lot of things that you just need to part of a whole. There's different pieces. So and I think that entrepreneurs, or that space, definitely do a lot of things they don't necessarily want to do. It's not necessarily why they do what they're doing, and I think any small business is just part of the parcel, really, and that's okay.
Yeah. But I think it's an empowered choice. I think it's a really empowered choice to say, I'm going to do this, knowing that there's going to be hoops to jump through along the way. Anyway, the other day I was at Buzzbar, and I was quite moved as, we're sitting in the kitchen, like, with our kebabs or whatever, falafel.
Yeah, that was delicious. I was so hungry.
Falafel from a plastic box from like across the road. Yeah. And I think one of your people were finishing, and he just said, like, thank you so much for today. And I was like, wow, it's just so nice that you don't take it for granted that they work here. So, obviously they should show up and do their work. And I've noticed quite a few ways how you show up in a really kind of beautiful and vulnerable way as a leader, I think. And coming back to that question, like, when do you call yourself an entrepreneur? What is the right balance for you between, yes, vulnerability, but also a kind of pride and sense of self-worthiness? That yes, I've really gone through, I've been places, I've gone through difficult things to arrive here. I'm worth it. This is me. I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. Isn't that the go-to, what everyone says when they want to take stock and find it slightly uncomfortable?
So you need to take stock. So do you think that we're not very good at actually stopping and acknowledging, like, hang on a second, it's been a tough journey. For me, it's been 8.5 years. And it's, there were moments when it was super difficult. So now that it's easier for me to actually take the time off and breathe and reflect. I feel like, firstly, humongous gratitude just looking at my team and people that work there, and that, enabled this business to pretty much be self-sustainable. But also I kind of reflect back to my kind of past self and all those moments. I try to send some love to those moments in my past history when I felt completely lost, but I felt like I have no idea how this is going to come out and whether the business is going to survive. And there were moments like that. So do you think taking stock is a difficult thing for us?
I think it's difficult because you're on a journey where there's two parts of it. One is you're really trying to get to particular goals and milestones. It's really important. Generally, in any form of small business, the day-to-day can really take all of you. A lot of you. And when you do that in a scale-up environment, day on day, month on month, it's always, I'll have a holiday next year kind of thing. You can very easily get caught in a loop, I think. And so I think the process is one thing. And when you've got one milestone, you're like, yes, got that, cool, moving on to the next. It's always moving on to the next.
It's always another fire to kind of extinguish, right? As opposed to actually looking at, I feel powerful, I feel grateful, and from that place, maybe moving on.
Yeah, I think also it comes back to when we reflect on what you're doing as a whole. It's a group of people doing it. It's an entire company. It's not just you. So I think sometimes as a founder, you see it a bit like some people see the world, like we're all connected, we're all in this together. So it's hard to sometimes you can be very proud of the company or of your team collectively, but it's sometimes hard to take yourself away and say, oh, good on you. I did. I was part of this. And I think that can be quite difficult. And maybe that comes to the crux of entrepreneurship. Like, is this a team who's done an amazing job or succeeded or created something new and different? Or is it me as an entrepreneur? And I think maybe that is the crux of why potentially I'm like, you don't really think like that on the day-to-day, do you? Like, you all have different roles. You work towards a common purpose. You hit those milestones. That's fantastic. Next step.
But maybe it's both. Maybe it's both, and maybe it's also learning to recognize your part, and learning to actually think back to the moments when things were really, really difficult. So I was a clueless Eastern European girl when I started this business. I knew next to nothing about financial services, about how to get clients, how to promote ourselves, how to actually build a brand that works, how to operationally, my co-founder is always more involved in that, but how to make it work operationally, how to scale it. And it's happened. And I wouldn't say, oh, it's all me, not at all. And I would never have done it without people around me. But I was brave. I really was. And I think we often are really crap at acknowledging our own strengths.
Yeah, and I think as leaders in any faction, it's something that's miserably very important, because we want our team as well, and the people around us and those who've supported, to always acknowledge the value in the self. And I think in Western culture, we often try to define ourselves individually or independently, and then we buy into brands and the likes. There's a whole thing to go into there. But that happens, at least I guess it happens everywhere now. It's globalization, but looking after the self as a pillar. It's a conversation I was actually having with Ray from Grass People Tree the other day. We were talking about this for about an hour about how looking after the self first and looking after the self is so important, because we use this example of a pillar. Like, you can be a pillar, you can be strong, you can grow, you can be tall, but without a roof, you can get very wet and cold alone. So it's like the community of us all being pillars within our own society or groups or And then together we can have this roof which really can weather us from all storms, and it can be cozy inside. So I think part of the self, part of the individual awareness or taking stock, as you quite rightly mentioned, is saying, actually, that was awesome, I did that, that's really cool. And then allowing the self to feel gratitude and then also showing that you're able to do that as well, and then kind of in some regard that's promoting that, you know, we should also do that, and we all feel, you know.
So do you think it's part of the vulnerability of a leader to actually acknowledge, okay, I'm standing here, I'm standing for something, I believe in something, but I can never do this on my own, is the openness to receive support and love from around you, be it, you know, you're a fantastic networker, so be it from a network of partners, be it through people that work with you, be it from people in your personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. I just fundamentally don't think that, well, we're not alone, are we? I think you once said to me when we were raising investment early doors, and I was like, oh, there's a bit of, you know, push and shove around the idea of we have a physical space. Like in this day and age, why aren't we all just an app? And you said to me, but Anna, until we don't have bodies, we need somewhere to be. You know, we're all going to need buildings. And of course, for us, our business model is based upon communication, collaboration, side by side, valuing everyone at the table.
People seeing each other face to face.
Identifying those skills. You get so much more done so quickly, so much more efficiently. And I think coming back to that is just, I'm just a very strong believer, I guess, as most people are in this day and age, of community. As long as we have bodies, as long as we are physically individual people, or we identify as physically individual people, they're going to want to come together. We're all on this planet. So, and
when you look back, I know you've got an amazing support network. Like, who are the people, and you can either mention them by name or just who they are in your life, that have really contributed to you being able to kind of stand as this pillar?
So many people. I think at the core would be my two closest friends growing up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they live on the other side of the world. And they inspire me.
That's amazing.
And the way they live their lives, and the conversations, and their openness to just being able to discuss anything and everything. I think it's so important, and I've always felt very much this grounding, I guess,
presence.
Presence, this rootedness that I belonged in the world, and that I had. You know, it's the power of three, we always call it. Etta. Yes, it's all our first names. It's a bit, but...
all the way in New Zealand.
They're in Australia, actually.
So close. Amazing.
And they travel. And so we meet every year, and we just spend a week together and catch up and talk about life. And we all have completely different lives. But it's really been a core to my life. I think my partners, everyone teaches you, I guess, a little bit of more about yourself. And I think most importantly is in this stage in business is being my business partner and co-founder, Paulo Rica. We are very much like brother and sister. And quite often people think we're together, and we laugh. That would never ever happen. But he's kind of like the brother I've just never had. I'm an only child, you see. And he's just, we've kind of spent 7 years head to toe sometimes on a bed working through the nights. And I think to be an entrepreneur really is very difficult doing it alone, because I think maybe that's what I feel. Entrepreneurship is kind of this really sense of being alone in a lot of regards. And I think it's tough. And you do have those moments, absolutely. But ultimately, and on the day-to-day and fundamentally, I've never been alone. So I think that's really been the core of being able to succeed.
So is the vulnerability in leadership recognizing that you can't really do this on your own?
Yes, absolutely.
But also that there's so many resources and people willing to help you if you're willing to open up and admit that you you need help.
Absolutely. And I think it's those unknown faces or those faces that you sit across from, even now, you know, and you spend your days and every few weeks sitting with and being able to be completely open and honest and vulnerable with. And I think as much as you feel like you can be vulnerable, there's always something, I think, that you feel like you have to be strong, or you have to not cry, or do you know what I mean? These kinds of things when you're with people who cry openly or who...
And we've cried together. I've definitely cried with you.
Yes, and I guess that's, you know, when I've seen you cry, I felt like I can cry. And that, I mean, I think we're really lucky to have wonderful partners.
It's not something to be ashamed of. It's just
it's such a strength.
Part of our richness and beauty as humans.
Well, I think that when the first time, I think that I saw you cry, I felt really empowered for you. And to be a part of this, I felt like this is how you feel. This is where you're going with this. This is absolutely all okay. And I don't think I've ever really seen someone cry with strength.
Oh, bless you. Oh, this is one of the most beautiful compliments I think I've ever had. What makes you say that?
That's exactly what I saw and what I felt. And
owning my tears, every single one of them.
With strength. You just did. You were a powerful, open woman or person in the room, just walking in, crying with strength, carrying on your day, doing your thing. Nothing, you weren't boxing yourself into any labels or anything. You just were, and we just continued the day. And I think that really touched me. That really, I often have not cried. I guess I have these moments randomly that I will cry, and it's kind of quite the big deal because I don't cry.
I remember, obviously, quite a few times I've been to Buzzbar now. Amazing place, a genius bar for marketing and branding services. Great concept, but I think what really makes it work is the people.
We always just wanted a place that was welcoming. That our vision and our mission has always been about marketing for all, accessible marketing. So being able to walk in off the street, have an idea, or have a campaign, or even trying to get something out the door from work that really helps your job role right then and there, and that means a lot of different people and different ideas. And from a marketing standpoint, we are all ultimately finding a universal theme to connect with people, but ultimately we are all different. And so having people who are all different walks of life, I think, was always very important to us, because they needed to connect with people from all walks of life, and we needed to also reflect that in our production. And I think Paolo and I were always about just saying, look, just be yourself, be who you are. That's what can bring most to the table. If you're fighting the self, it doesn't really work. And that's also what we really I guess ask of our clients when they come in, like what are their strengths, what are they good at, how do they identify, because ultimately it's about using what they have with our skills to be able to kind of bring it out and for them to be living the life of the works that they want to. So I guess it's happened through our values and through the way we want to work, and also crediting my co-founder, who is a very open and most probably from the outset would be identified as a straight white male, but ultimately no one would ever identify him as such. He's just very open. He's very caring. He's just on a lot of regards quite, I guess, feminine. In nature, it's a very nice balance of this masculine and femininity. And I think many people would most probably say I do too. And I think that was a really nice balance for us, because we were able to connect with many different people. And in that space, I think our team feel like they can be exactly who they want to be and who they are. But we've never specifically tried to hire a particular type of person per se, more just have a space where
a culture of openness.
A culture of openness. And I think that brings through people who want to be open as well.
Yeah. The other day I was actually talking to a friend of mine, Anik, on this show about the balance of feminine, masculine, and how, there's the push side, which is so important for an entrepreneur to actually have an agenda, to have a goal, to stand for something, and the surrender side, or the allowing side. And I actually totally agree with you that it really strikes me that you have the both a incredibly organized and meticulous side of you, and I've also worked with you as an investor and just really impressed by that, and also incredibly kind of caring, more surrendered side. So I was wondering if you had any advice to entrepreneurs or prospective entrepreneurs out there, how to bring out both sides in you and use them in business. So do you think that your feminine and masculine side were always in balance, or do you think when you first started you evolved more in your masculine because you needed to get the company out there, whereas when the team grew you stepped more into your feminine? How did it work for you across your journey?
I think actually potentially the other way around. I think it's how we identify what are feminine and masculine characteristics. I think definitely being in Shoreditch in London, people don't really identify in labels or boxes. So I guess we're using this language for this way of communicating with the audience right now. But I think, and I have just done so with referring to Paolo and myself, but I think that ultimately the fight for balance is where the beauty comes in. I think that internally the masculine and the feminine are usually fighting each other. It's whether we recognize it or not.
Well, maybe fighting, or hopefully, I'm getting to a place where they actually like and support each other. That's also possible. And
yes.
I also know some people, like teachers, I do quite a lot of tantra and kind of shamanism type work, and quite a lot of my teachers, you can kind of see that there's this stunning union in their personality, that like both of the sides of the personality they have are really kind of in support of each other, and they refer to it as a kind of tantric marriage of the feminine and masculine, but you can really sense it when it's there. At least I can. It's stunning to watch, and I think when I interact with you, I've definitely seen both sides. So it's interesting that you feel it's a bit of a fight, but I guess it can be.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. I guess for me, a fight is not necessarily a bad thing at this point. It's a bit like saying argument, I guess. Some people would say argument is proposing a case, whereas, and between two people or a few people, but other people say, no, an argument is people actually having a go at each other. So I guess when I refer to the fight of imbalance, the fight here on the either side, it's I think in neuroscience, our minds we're not even physically balanced in our minds. Like evolutionary wise, we must try to regain balance, and then the kind of the fight to find balance, I guess, or shall we say the process of finding balance, is that ultimately we can never be balanced. We can try to be balanced. We can work towards being balanced.
Of course.
But we will never be balanced. And that is actually the beauty of evolution, of growth, of development, of change. And so when we see this in ourselves, the fight between the masculine and the feminine, maybe that language from an analytical point of view, we could see could be used because of, being born and bred in potentially this culture, and how it's evolving and changing today. Maybe we would use different language. But in saying that, I think the evolutionary piece here is finding the balance that can never really be found. And for me, that's really interesting. I think we all inside are both. I don't think when like often we hear that we're no genders, or but I think we're both. I don't like to take away from people who identify in different ways, but I would very much think that most people would agree that we I have both what level or scale of femininity or masculinity we may hold. And that's most probably becoming more of a popular theme and thought. Spectrums of different kinds, whether sexual, gender, life, how we communicate in different ways, it kind of relies on that. But I think actually I see it more as a balance between the two potentially, and the fight for balance. And I find that in business, coming back to your question, it is difficult because you are working with people who identify in different ways, who have different balances and have different relationships and history to that balance.
Yeah.
And you ultimately are there to communicate and understand each other and help to share their story.
Yeah.
So you kind of need to find that balance between you, and that can change. I think in your role, driving things forward, being identified as a woman from the outside can seem to be, as we've all heard, maybe more of a nagger, or do you know what I mean? You maybe could be potentially seen as, or are being more outwardly emotional and these kinds of things, which can be categorized in different ways. And then balancing that with the masculine side, it could come out, it can be difficult to see kind of drive as opposed to, aggression or things like that. And I think sometimes that's an interesting area which we as women, I think, find it maybe difficult to balance, and still do. I think it's there.
I love it.
So, yeah.
So do you think, to wrap up, in a world where we can cry with strength, thank you very much for that compliment, where younger people you mentioned, make their choices based on whether they ideologically align with a given brand, for example. In a world like this, being a leader in a world like this, does vulnerability trump power, or trump the agenda-driven leadership behavior for you?
Yes, I don't think you can be a leader or a founder, an entrepreneur, or any of these associative roles or words without being vulnerable. It's impossible. Yeah. I think there's other things that come into vulnerability that maybe sometimes have a different share of voice, shall we say, or present themselves at different times. So sometimes being vulnerable doesn't look exactly what people think being vulnerable is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you do these things, you are hugely vulnerable. Yeah. You have just taken so many risks.
Yeah.
And you have asked other people to take them with you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't think it's possible to do any of these things without being vulnerable. And I think anyone who truly is not vulnerable, I mean, it's a bit like the construct of freedom.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I think, in and of itself, it is vulnerability.
Fabulous. Okay, well, let's have a little tea toast, and here's to being powerful because of and through your vulnerability. Thanks for joining me myself.
Thank you. To you.